Thanks for coming. So as Paul kind of already introduced, I have been working in Gumantar, Indonesia, making a best practice coffee guide for the local community. So Gumantar is located on the island of Lombok. It is currently the poorest region of the island. Many of the practices that the farmers are using to try to make more money is resulting in land and ecosystem degradation. And so these combined are resulting in decreased health and well-being of the community. So that's kind of how I saw this as a sustainability problem and something that I should take a deeper look at. So I started last summer, I visited on a different project, and that's how I got introduced to this area and kind of started looking at this. So once I decided that this would be my project, I sent surveys to the farmers, I did some background research, and then I visited Gumantar again, where I conducted site visits and farmer interviews. I came back with all of that information, and then I assessed the problem using sustainability frameworks such as Gibson's principles and sustainable development goals. I then took that assessment and looked at intervention points and decided that a multi-section guide would be a good way of connecting the farmers with the information that they were requesting. So I drafted each section of a guide that I'll talk about a little bit more in a minute. I sent it to a panel of reviewers that was comprised of subject matter experts, including a couple of farmers from Gumantar, a coffee farmer from Hawaii, a couple of academics from both America and Lombok. So once I got their feedback back, I finalized the guide and produced a sustainable SWOT analysis for each section. So as I mentioned, I used Gibson's sustainability principles and sustainable development goals. I started with Gibson's principles and determined that improving income potential and maintaining environmental integrity were two of the areas that in the scope of this project I could probably have a good impact. So I then took that and looked at the sustainable development goals. I know that they all need to be looked at for something to really be considered sustainable development, but I used this to kind of narrow my scope and determine that focusing on 1, 8, 10, 15, and 17 would kind of maximize my time. And then hopefully iterations of the project in the future could focus more on some of the other goals. So my partners and stakeholders, I worked directly with the farmers a lot, actually, which was wonderful. I also worked with the local government a little bit. So you can see me with one of the farmers there. I have worked with Gumantar Vocational Education Center to connect myself with farmers, as well as they will be crucial for connecting the guide with the farmers when it is delivered to them. And they are connected with ASU's Global Resolve here. So I've been working with a group of current Global Resolve students as well. They've been very helpful. So as I mentioned, I created a guide with a few different sections. So the sections were farming strategies, drying techniques, business skills, coffee certification requirements, and additional resources. Each of these sections has multiple subsections. And so the guide will be provided, there will be a hard copy delivered, but it will also be housed in 2 solar spells that are in different locations in the community. A solar spell, you can see a picture of it there, is a solar powered digital library that is that you can connect to using a self-generated hotspot. So that will have this guide and some other resources provided by Global Resolve available to the community. So COVID-19 impacted, I think, all of our projects in one way or another. Luckily, it didn't hurt mine too bad because most of mine has been remote anyways through this semester. So some of the impacts that it did have was the reviewer panel that I mentioned earlier. I had sent the guide to them to be reviewed like right when all the shutdowns started happening. So the time that it took them to respond was a lot longer than had been anticipated. So that put me back a little bit, but not too bad. And then my overall communication frequency really cut back, both internationally and domestically. I had been meeting with the Global Resolve students about twice a week in person. And once spring break, we didn't come back from spring break. So then we only had like a couple of Zoom meetings after that. And then the farmers and everybody, their communication was really cut down too, because they're worrying about a whole bunch of other things. So as I mentioned, the guide will be delivered through SolarSpell mostly. And with COVID, all of the travel arrangements have been postponed, and we don't know when that the devices will be delivered. So those are the main ways that the virus has impacted it. But the outcomes that I have are, so the reviewer panel has provided me with some feedback. Strengths, they considered one of the main strengths the amount of communication that I've had with the farmers and the co-production. They believe that that will help the guide be adopted by the community at large. They also thought that the drying practices section would hold great benefit for immediate economic impact, because there are tech or strategies that can be implemented during this next drying cycle that they can see economic gain right away, whereas a bunch of the other suggestions will take longer to kind of take root. One of the weaknesses is, although the farming strategies is pretty in-depth, farming coffee is has so many aspects to it that there's always room for talking more about that, different infections and whatever, molds and things that can affect the coffee. And so there's a lot of room for talking more about the agricultural part and nutrient cycles. So the actual impacts on the community are still greatly unknown because of, the guide hasn't been delivered yet. And even when it is, like I said, a lot of the practices will take a while to take root and see differences. But one of the impacts that we can see so far is partnership. The partnership between the community and Global Resolve through this project has really been strengthened, which is great because Global Resolve hopes to continue this project and others in the future. So as I mentioned, that most of the impacts for this won't be known for some time. So it's proposed that Global Resolve will do yearly assessments to see if the guide is taking root and how it's doing. Also, each section of the guide, especially the farming one, could be explored in greater depth. As I mentioned, some of the sustainable development goals that I didn't particularly focus on should be focused on in the future. One of these is equity through gender, class, and disability inclusion. I suggest that this could be done by working with this lady that you see in the top picture. She works in a neighboring community. She has spearheaded a coffee roasting company that is owned and operated all by single moms. And she is really excited she wants to expand her model to neighboring communities. I also believe that additional guides for agriculture could be produced for this community. They farm cacao, banana, avocado, cashews, and cloves. Currently, the local university that I've been working with has a program going on in the community teaching the locals how to transform cashews into a snack food. You can see that in the bottom picture, but there are still some knowledge gaps along that could be addressed. And then, as I mentioned, the Gumantar Vocational Education Center and Global Resolve have an array of other projects that they're working on, such as sustainable tourism and English education programs. So some of my personal takeaways, communication and stakeholder engagement were really key to the successful completion of this project, as I think they are in most projects. And that was really obvious. And then obviously COVID showed us all that no matter how prepared you are for risks, unexpected barriers can always pop up. And so we all had to kind of figure out how to deal with that, which was stressful, but probably a good learning experience. And then I got experience planning and executing an international project and working across distances, time zones, cultures and languages, which is awesome because I want to, in the future, work on international projects. So then here are some pictures from my time there. On the left, you can see one of the current drying techniques. They just kind of lay it out on a plastic mat. On the top, you can see us sorting through coffee beans, determining which ones are quality for market and which ones are not. And then at the bottom, you can see one of the fields that I have been working in. Thank you.